Okay, so let's get started. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about driving results today and making sure that we can execute against our strategic plans. So we'll talk about how do we measure hang on here just a second. Okay, why do we need these performance measurements? I mean, you would think why do you have to have them, right? A lot of people don't, and they should. And so what are the benefits of KPIs? What are SMART KPIs? I know you guys, I think in one of your other sessions have talked about SMART goals. So this is going to be along that same line. And then leading and lagging indicators, maybe you already know a little bit about this. We're going to apply that to KPIs. Also, we're going to create some sample KPIs just on things that I thought might be advantage for you all in your organization. And then how do we track and report and communicate those results? What are some of the best practices for doing that? So why do we need to measure our performance? I mean, we put a plan out there. We already told everybody what we're going to do. Why should we have to measure it? But in the world of executing against your strategic plan, if you do not measure it, how do you know when you got to the place you're trying to get to? How do you know you achieved the outcomes that you have projected? How do you enforce to your stakeholders that, you know what, we're doing a great job, look at what we have achieved? And I think that, all organizations, I don't care what type of organization you are, needs to measure your success. And so a strategy without KPIs is a little bit like a map without a compass. We don't really know if we're going in the right direction. We also want to measure that progress towards defined outcomes, as I mentioned before. And then also organizations are always changing things, tweaking things along the way, because we get things thrown at us that we don't necessarily expect. And we have to adjust our plan a little bit accordingly. We still want to stay on track from what our goals, our long-term goals, our vision, our mission is, but we may have to adjust some of the executables about how we get there. So we also need to make sure that our KPIs are adjusted and that we're still moving on target, right? And then also just measuring and monitoring where we're going and making sure that that everything is moving in the right direction, as I said before. And that is the main goal of having these types of measurements, is to make sure that we're on track and that we're going to meet our outcomes that we have predicted or suggested in our strategic plan. So let's talk about key performance indicators. Benefits of just general KPIs, you want to improve your employee engagement. One of the things that happens with strategic plans, I think, and I have seen, is that some companies will do this elaborate strategic plan. It looks amazing, right? And then they put it over here on the shelf. Well, I have it, I've got it, but nobody knows about it, right? I mean, maybe you had to show it to your leadership team. Maybe you had to show it to the investors that are invest in your business or your organization, or your donors in your case. I have it, but what am I doing with it? And then your employees that work for you, or maybe in your case, employees and volunteers, they really don't have a sense of what they're trying to accomplish by working with you. So one of the things that KPIs does is it allows people to see every day, and from a trajectory in the future, where are we going? Why are we doing this? And how are we moving along that track? It also connects a purpose to your culture. And so one of the things that you have is your mission, your vision, your values, and it gets employees and volunteers excited every day to come to work and to get excited about what you have projected to accomplish over a year, over 5 years, whatever time frame that you set your planning up for. And then it also makes everyone accountable for their performance. So one of the things that's really great in corporate business, and I'm not sure how it works from an organization such as yours, but performance management is a big part of taking employees through the process of making sure that they know that they achieved what they were supposed to for the role that they have. And performance management is a great place to incorporate these KPIs and part of the KPIs that actually are part of that role that lead up to helping achieve that goal or our outcome that we're trying to achieve. So it's great if you can incorporate those into everyone's performance and performance metrics in order to ensure that people know why am I doing this and what am I working for and what means success, not only to the company, but to me, or to the organization, but to me. It also helps make your strategic plan executable. And I always, when I talk to people about strategic plans, again, you can make the most beautiful plan, but if you can't execute against it, what good is it, right? It's just sitting over here on the shelf gathering dust. We really want to do what we say we're going to do. And we really want to show our stakeholders and anyone who's invested in our organization that whether it's employees or volunteers or investors, whoever it is, we want to show them that we've really done what we said we're going to do. And so by making your strategic plan executable, that helps us go towards that direction. Any questions yet? Okay, good. Okay, so what's the difference between a key performance indicator and a metric? Because there's lots of metrics out there, right? I mean, we keep metrics about all kinds of things. And so a business metric is usually a quantifiable measure used to track or assess some kind of specific business process. And I use the example of website traffic in this particular discussion, because website traffic is that type of common business metric. You're going to watch and I'm sure you guys do this too, is watch your website to make sure that you're getting the volume of action and people, unique visitors and things like that come to your website in order to interact with you. And so many times we'll have a lot of different business metrics that we use around our website to ensure that we're getting that engagement that we need. That's a business metric, but it's not necessarily a KPI. A KPI is really a type of performance metric that helps you really understand how your organization, your department, or the individual themselves is performing against their strategic goals, as we were talking about before. Usually KPIs have a very defined timeline, and they may be ongoing, but for the time frame in your strategic goal that you set out, we've set a specific amount of achievement within a specific amount of time that's going to get us to that particular outcome. And that's where KPIs are very different than just straight business metrics. So every KPI is really a business metric, but not every business metric is a KPI. So hopefully that makes sense. So let's take a look at a few comparisons between KPIs and business metrics. So a KPI, like I said, has a specific deadline. It tracks towards targets and objectives. A metric is really ongoing, like the website traffic that we talked about, or the website type metrics. And you're going to monitor it ongoing because you need a certain level of business performance on a daily basis, right? Or you want that particular business performance. And then some of the examples could be like monthly recurring revenue from a KPI perspective would be like 1 million in one quarter. So you're going to achieve 1 million in monthly recurring revenue in Q1. So we would measure that and make sure that we have definitely achieved that and that we were on target to achieve that during Q1, where the metric of monthly recurring revenue, that's really just a constant ongoing, hey, you know, where do we stand along this trajectory of recurring revenue? So it's a little bit different. Questions? Smart KPIs. I think you guys talked maybe about smart metrics before. Did someone have a question?
No. Cynthia, it's very clear. I do have a particular question though, but I think you probably get into it later on. It's in terms of performance management for subordinates, because I think in most organizations it tends to be a looking back kind of exercise to say, you know, what have we done in the last 6 months,
Right.
in terms of what we were planning to do, rather than a continuous process where you engage with your staff on a weekly or monthly basis to kind of get a sense of how they are performing, whether there are any challenges that should be tackled at that point, to make sure that at the 3 months interval, you do make some progress.
Yes,
So
you're
just a reflection on my side.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And today, and I don't know, maybe y'all haven't tried to use these yet, but there are many performance management platforms that you can engage in that help to, you know, input your strategic plan and cascade those requirements down to certain roles and responsibilities. That way, the person who is responsible for a certain segment of that can track as they're going along. Plus, you can have conversations with them, like you were talking about, monthly, every 3 months, whatever makes sense in your organization, to ensure that if everything's going well, that's a wonderful conversation. But if it's not going well, you can work together to figure out how to get things back on track, because every person has a valid responsibility in the goal of executing your strategic plan. And by keeping track of it in that particular way, or even through document format, just having those regular discussions like you were talking about to keep everybody moving in the right direction. And if somebody's having an issue, or maybe they don't understand exactly what they're supposed to do in order to execute against that particular responsibility of theirs, you can help them through those conversations. But you're right, we want to get in front of it and not wait till the end and go, oh gosh, you know, you didn't achieve this. And that's not a great outcome for you or your subordinate, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Very, very good point, though, and very good question. All right, so let's talk a little bit about SMART KPIs. Like I said, I think you might have talked in one of your other sessions about SMART goals, and you know, this is the same kind of thing. We definitely want to use the SMART acronym and make them, you know, specific, make sure they have clear and well-defined focus, each KPI, make sure it's measurable and, you know, can be quantified, that it's attainable, and that you can reach a specific outcome within a given time frame. Now I'm going to stop here, because while I believe in attainable targets, I do believe in stretch targets as well, because and in every organization that I've worked in, I've done both. It's great if you meet the target, but I always maybe go a little bit more and put some stretch targets in. And the reason I do that, and we've always done and put incentives in place, if we meet the stretch targets, then, we reward people by doing something for them in some way. And it is really great because it gives those that are really able to maybe potentially meet the regular target with not a lot of problems. It gives them some additional room to work on things that are beyond that. So you might think about that. I mean, maybe when you get started, you just do straight targets, but then eventually add on the stretch targets. It's just really a great way to work, and it makes you sometimes think, okay, maybe I can get a little further than what I originally thought I could. Everybody's working at different paces. So the main thing is that the first brush, you should definitely put a parameter in place that you feel like is reasonable enough to attain. And then they need to be relevant. They have to be aligned with your business objectives, your goals, and they have to make sure that they are critical to your success. You don't want to put a ton of KPIs in. You want those that really will read and help you convey your critical success factors. And so you won't have like a ton of KPIs. You'll have a set amount that will be able to show you at a glance that you're on target. You'll have lots of business metrics, lots of things that allow you to see how things are running, may even roll up into these KPIs, but you won't necessarily have a ton of KPIs. You want those that are most specific to your strategic plan and will allow you to, say, okay, if I'm on target on all these 5 or these 10 KPIs, then you know what, we're on track and we're moving forward towards our goals and objectives and the outcomes that we have defined. Also, you want to time bound them. You want them to be, I'm doing it in a month, I'm doing it in a quarter, I'm doing it in a year, whatever makes sense for that particular KPI. Yes, Amy.
Yes. So we're, most of us in this call are coming, although have had maybe experience in the business realm, a lot of us are coming from nonprofit organizations where a lot of our funding comes from grants,
right?
And have been really aligned around a monitoring and evaluation framework. And don't, at least for myself, have not used the language of key performance indicators. And one of the things that I have noticed again and again is a tendency to in a monitoring and evaluation plan, to really overdo it. So you're feeling like you're having to look and measure everything, and you often don't get to do that. And if you do, you're putting a ton of energy into that, ends up in a report, goes on a shelf. Can you just describe the process of how you prioritize, like how you decide, like, these are the things we want to measure? We're not going to go, what would be interesting to know, but like really honing in on what are those key things that we really want to spend our time in measuring.
Okay. Yeah. And you're exactly right. And I had this, I just finished the strategic plan with our academic affairs here at JMU. And one of the things happened, just like you said, is they want to measure everything, right? And we're like, no, that measuring everything doesn't really tell us, doesn't specifically tell us, hey, what are the points that we need to keep track of in order to make sure that we have this in good condition and we're executing against our goals and objectives in a way that makes sense to get us to the outcome that we want. Same way with this. If you come back and you look at your strategic plan, you look at your goals and objectives, you can determine from that, personally, usually you'll have a KPI associated with most of your goals. And so unless you have some that are similar or some that roll up to a certain level, but what I like to do is I like to put KPIs at the highest level. And so when you look at your strategic plan, look at the highest level in your plan that will allow you to show, that, hey, if I measure at this level, then I'm actually going to be able to tell that we're on track and that we are getting the outcome that we have set out, that we have predicted that we are going to achieve. And I think as long as you do that, I think the problem comes, just like Amy was talking about, where you start to put so many measurements down in the details of your plan that it gets a little bit convoluted. And there are people who are executing against the plan that will want to track that because they have to provide data in order to put towards the KPI. And so that's where things start to get a little bit challenging, I guess, because you have to determine from the highest level KPI, what data do I need to support this? So if I'm doing KPIs for a plan, for a strategic plan, I'm going to look for the highest level goal that I can in the section that we're talking about in order to establish that KPI. And I know that it's something that we're going to be able to use to drive the performance, because that's what we're talking about here. What do we need to drive performance? And what do we need to know to drive performance? And that's where those SMART KPIs come out. I hope that makes sense. Any questions? It's something that you'll have to practice. It's not something that everybody gets the first time. The first time around, you may have a few too many, and then as you're executing, you're going to go, okay, I didn't need all of that. I could have collapsed it into this, this, and this. So a plan may have, depending on how big the plan is, the plan may have only maybe 5 to 10 KPIs. That's it. And it just depends on what the plan looks like and how it's architected to get to that. But I would still stay at the higher level, because really what we're talking about is driving the performance forward. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about leading and lagging indicators. You guys probably already know about this, but I just wanted to mention it. Lagging indicators are kind of what we were just talking about, with respect to subordinates, is that, it kind of tells you something is wrong, but it's really kind of too late to correct it, right? Because it's telling you at the end, this is what happened. And so lagging indicators don't really get into enough information that will allow you to do anything before you get the outcome. And so we want to back up and work with leading indicators that are predictive and they drive performance. They tell us about the future. They actually allow us to project what we're going to achieve in the future, not waiting until the end and going, we measured this and this is how it came out. I got into the same discussion with our academic affairs here at JMU, because we were kind of doing that. We were going, okay, this is our plan, but we didn't look at it until and this is just the academic affairs part, not the in general university part, but academic affairs was used to putting a plan in place and then maybe working towards it, but nobody really said anything about it until the end. And then, oh, here's what we achieved, right? And then they write a report and that was the end of it, and they go on to the next one. But what happens is you get to the end of a session or end of a segment, say it's an annual type situation, annual planning, then you get to the end of it and you're like, oh, wow, we didn't do this and we didn't do that and we didn't achieve this. And when you're talking to people who are investing in your company or in your organization, you're trying to grow it, the stakeholders that have a vested interest in seeing you succeed, that really doesn't help. You really need to be in front of it and driving that. And then at the end, they're seeing, okay, you did do what you said you were going to do. So leading indicators help us do that. And good KPIs are really leading indicators on our predictive, and they really drive the performance of the organization. So you might want to keep that in mind as you're creating your KPIs going forward. All performance indicators can be lagging. You can, put them into a lagging state. But it's really how you interpret them that can turn them into a leading indicator. So I use the example of achievements of grades in a class. At the beginning of a class, I can say, I am going to achieve an A in this class. I know I'm going to do that because I'm going to execute by doing this and this and this and this, making A's on my test, turning in all my homework on time, whatever it is that gets me there. Those are metrics along the way. But I know that KPI is projecting that I'm going to get an A in the class. The lagging part of it is, what did I actually achieve? I actually achieved an A, or maybe I didn't make it, because I didn't execute effectively. So hopefully that makes sense. Or is there any questions?
Apologies, Cynthia. I'm still a little bit confused in terms of the difference between lagging indicators and leading indicators.
Okay.
Can you maybe provide another example?
Sure. Let's see. Well, for instance, a lagging indicator is like you were talking about for your subordinates. A lagging indicator would be reporting on what they actually achieved at the end. That's a lagging indicator. You really don't see those until everything is finished. And so those are the reporting out of what has been achieved. A leading indicator is more predictive. What am I going to achieve? How am I, not necessarily how am I going to get there, but what am I going to achieve in the future? Where lagging indicators are, what have I achieved after I've already done it? And that's why KPIs are really leading indicators. And the reason is because you're predicting the future. Lagging indicators already tell you what happened. It's already done and it's too late to do anything about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Am I right to say that the leading indicators are more like your targets?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. More like your what?
Your target, with the target that you set yourself, that I must be able to achieve this, because you're saying they must be predictive.
Right. I think that's the main thing you're exactly right. I think that's the main thing to keep in mind. Leading indicators are predictive. Lagging indicators are at the end and telling you what you achieved, and you can't do anything about it. They're it's like, let's see, what would be an example? I achieved at the end of a cycle $1 million in my bank account, right? But if that's not what I really wanted to achieve, if I maybe wanted $2 million, I really can't do anything about it at that point, right? Because the period of time that I chose to measure, it's too late to do anything about it, because maybe it's the end of the annual cycle or whatever. Maybe that's when I took the measurement. So the leading indicators allow you to drive performance because it's at a time in the future that things have not been completed yet. You know, we haven't actually started to execute maybe against our plan. And so we put leading indicators, which our KPIs are, to establish a baseline of how we are going to work along the way, and at the timeline that we set 1 month, 1 year, 5 years, whatever it is, we can measure it based on what we predicted. So if we predicted we're going to have $1 million in a year and we achieve $1 million in a year, and guess what? We met our goal. But if we predicted that we were going to make $2 million in a year and we only made $1 million, then we did not make our goal. And the reason that leading indicators are so important is that, especially as established as a KPI, it allows you to make adjustments along the way. So if we start tracking in that annual cycle and say we're at the middle of the year and we're only at 250,000, but we know at the end of that annual cycle, we've predicted we're going to be at $1 million. We got to make some adjustments somewhere, right? Because we're already into the year, 6 months, and we're only at 250,000. We gotta make up some time. We gotta make some adjustments. We gotta figure out how are we going to adjust things to make our $1 million goal that we've predicted. Does that help? Hopefully.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we'll talk more about this as we get into the actual KPI breakout session that we're going to do. Hang on just a second. A little drink there. Okay. So now we're going to break out into sessions. I don't know, Charlie, if we need to do 3 or 2. Since there's not as many people on the call.
Yeah, we'll do 2.
Okay, and so let's do I think KPI 1. Let's do group 2 and group 3 KPI. So group 1 do donor retention rate and donor growth rate KPIs, and group 2 do beneficiary satisfaction rate and % of performance of goals met. So what I want y'all to do here is to just take these and write a KPI for each one of them. Excuse me. I think that'll give you a sense of what it's like to write a KPI. Remember, establish a timeline for that. Make sure you have a goal that you want to meet, and within whatever specific time frame it is, and then it's something that's in the future so that you're going to be working towards that in your process. I'm so sorry. So if we can break everybody out, and let's take about, I don't know, let's take about 10 minutes. Like, it shouldn't take too long for you guys to do that, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about them. Okay,
They should be open now.
thank you.
It's like everyone's still in the main room. Most folks are.
Yeah, I don't see anybody going anywhere.
Is everyone getting
Sorry.
an invite?
There you go.
There, now I see it.
Okay, all right. Yeah, everybody's going.
We can give them till about 9-ish or something like that to,
Okay, about 15 minutes.
yeah, to finish up. And then we'll talk about them, and then I have a couple of things on reporting and just, you know, kind of bringing things around as a summary, and then I should be done.
All right.
So hopefully I'm not confusing people too much.
I don't think so.
It's hard, and they're not the only ones. I mean, everybody has a difficulty with this if you're not used to doing it.
Mhm. Right, well, and just integrating it into the daily routine, I think, right, if it's not integrated, if that isn't what you're expected to spend part of your time on,
Right.
I think that can be especially challenging. And
Yes.
a lot of the kind of setups of nonprofits and NGOs, you have, you know, one person who's tasked with monitoring evaluation, and they're supposed to be doing all of this measurement.
So, sorry, Amy.
Yes.
We are in group 1. So are we tackling gift secured and fundraising ROI? Which one are we tackling?
I was going to have you do, since we're only going to do 2 groups, I was going to have you do what group 2 was going to do. I thought that might be a little bit easier.
Okay, so we're going to do donor retention rate and donor growth rate.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Harry, you're able to get back in the room?
Yeah, there you
Yes.
go.
He was.
Yeah.
Very good.
So I think that, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. And they were talking about that. I think it was Harry was talking about that when he was talking about subordinates and things like that, you know, because if you don't tie it to what people do every day, and this is why I spoke about the performance management pieces of it, then you know, there's always other things to do, and they may not necessarily track towards the things that are most important for meeting your plan, right?
Right,
You have to tie it in.
right. And I think finding ways to do it that isn't about just writing reports and filling in spreadsheets, I think is incredibly important, right? It's like, what are the times where we just check in and we just share with each other, and then we adjust course and we move forward without it being a really laborious kind of process.
Well, I'm assuming that they, this might not be right to assume this. I'm assuming that they have some kind of discussion with their employees and maybe volunteers that each year or each whatever time frame segment, that here's what we're going to accomplish in this particular time segment. Because, you know, how do they assess whether they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? Or that they're achieving the requirements for their role or position. You know, I don't know, but that's where I would do some of it in that. And then, like you said, the get together to talk about it, until you have a platform that you can put all of this into and cascade that out. That's probably one of the better ways to take care of it.
Mhm.
There are lots of platforms out there that allow you to put your strategic plan in them and then cascade those out to the different levels, whether they be managers or directors or the actual frontline individual employees. So when they get to that point, that could be an option for them to do.
Mhm.
You know, they may be a little bit, that might be a little bit premature for them to be able to do that. But just having a manual process that does that. I mean, incorporate that into how they manage their employees today,
Mhm.
you know, so we'll see.
Right. Yeah, and I'm sure there are ways it's happening. And I guess it's just a question of where could it be happening differently or
Right.
better.
Well, once they have their consolidated plan where everybody comes together to achieve what they're going to achieve collectively as a unit, not necessarily individual sections, right? That's where I think it especially becomes more important because, you know, here's what we're doing to move our organization as a whole forward. That's why those high level KPIs make sense. And then they have what they need to do in their own individual areas, right? As a result of what they've been tasked to do, I guess.
Mhm.
So it's not an easy process. And the way they've been working, it's going to be challenging to bring it all together, I'm sure.
Yes.
Especially, and I mean, it's challenging everywhere. I mean, you can imagine in an academic setting how challenging it is when everybody has their own ideas of what they should be doing and everything's done by consensus. You know, it's not like in a company where you can say, okay, this is what we're going to do, cascade it out, and this is what you have to do for your position, right? In the academic world, it's like, okay, we have to come together, we all have to agree on it. It takes a long time to get everybody on the same page.
Hmm.
So I don't know if this particular world would be a little bit more like that or not.
Right. It's probably somewhere in between.
Yeah.
We talked about organizational culture in one of our classes. And several people identified their unit as hierarchical.
Yeah.
But I think they're each a little bit different as well.
Yeah. The problem, like in academics, is nobody's really like in charge, you know, like they're the head of things, but they don't have any authority in a way to, like a company does, where, you know, your CEO, your VPs, your directors, they all have authority over and with their subordinates to make things happen. I don't know how it works in this organization. And so that makes it extremely difficult because it's all influential versus being, okay, this is what we have to do and I'm leading this organization. And, you know, it's more, like you said, it's more hierarchical. So, so yeah, it's challenging.
And do you find you're making some headway as you're working with?
Yeah, I spent 2 years working with them. They never had a plan before, but they have one now. And it's not the best plan from my perspective, but it's a start, right? So it took 2 years to get everybody to that point, and we are measuring it. So yeah, so I worked with Heather and with Jennifer Campfield and with all the academic council and their teams. And yeah, it was crazy because it was like, I thought I was hired when they hired me to actually implement the plan. So I get there and the only thing they have are these 3 broad statements that have no teeth in them, right? And so I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do with this? Where's the plan? And there is no plan. And so that's what I spent the first year on, was just creating a plan. And then the second year, measurements and all those kind of things, and getting everybody to understand, you know, what it was that we were trying to do. So yeah. Crazy.
Well, good for you for sticking with that.
It was like it was a little bit like herding cats. And of course,
Yeah.
it's so different than being in a corporation where, everybody, the leadership team comes together. This is what we're going to do, cascade it down to everybody, and everybody executes against it, right? I mean, that's simple in my mind, but it's not simple there.
Mm.
But definitely a learning experience, and that's why I applied for that to see if my stuff translated over, and it did to the most part. But
Mhm.
I kept getting a lot of pushback on, oh, we're not a business. I'm like, yeah, you are. You just don't look at yourself like that.
Right.
So yeah, it was a fun time. I had a really good time with them.
Mm. And are folks monitoring it? Are they actually? They
Yep.
are.
They're executing against it. Yeah.
Mhm.
We did about, I don't know, 5 or 6 KPIs that were, performance indicators that kind of showed them whether they were on track or not. Now, who knows? They change things all the time. So hopefully they'll adjust things and they'll keep up with it. But I said, I got you here from those 3 nebulous statements. And Jennifer was just starting her job at that time. And so it was really fun to work with her and get her, kind of up to speed. And now she can take it and do what she needs to do with it. And she's doing a really good job.
Mm.
So
Good. Well, it's
Yeah.
nice to have somebody in charge of it. That's
exactly. Well, and it's going to be time in 2026, I think it is, actually in 2025 to redo the JMU plan. And so this is an offshoot of the JMU plan, right? Because it has to be aligned with that, because you can't have academic affairs doing something different than the entire university, right? So
right.
so
That'll
that's
be another opportunity.
exactly. And then they'll get to have fun doing it, getting it all rearranged again.
Right.
So it'll be fun. Well, hopefully I'm not like creating a lot of confusion for these guys. I tried to make it as straightforward as possible, and they have this, and they can always email me if they have questions or whatever,
Mm-hmm. Right. Will be interesting to hear what they come back with.
Yeah.
Which is just another minute or so, right? 9 o'clock. Everyone need to come back.
Yep. The weather is so lovely here
Is it?
this few days. Well, where are you? Are you in town or?
I'm in Maine right now.
Oh, yeah. Well, you wouldn't want to be here. It's been raining, pouring for the last several days, which we need. Now it's all foggy today. So wasn't really the great time to move, right?
Oh, right in the middle of all the rain. Of course not.
Exactly. Exactly. There's Betty.
Yeah. So, Charlie, do you want to start letting folks back in?
Yep.
It'll
Yeah.
take a minute for them to
Doing it now.
get here once the rooms get closed. Betty, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes.
How is the graduation?
It's good. It's just ended now.
Excellent. So the folks are just coming back from small groups
Uh-huh.
and are working on key performance indicators.
Oh, it's a shame we had to miss this. I think we started the ceremony later than we thought.
Okay.
And I remember Cynthia, I think she took us through technology, choice of, yeah, I loved it. I mean, I'd
Yes.
never thought about that. So it's a shame we missed this, but we are now here. I think Dr. George is still saying goodbye to the guests. So I ran off as soon as it ended. So yeah. It's happy to be back.
All right.
Looks like another person trying to come in too.
Yes, Jasper is joining.
All right. Looks like everybody's back. Yeah. Okay, so how did everyone do? Was it harder than you thought? Nobody
Yes,
said.
it was somehow challenging. Another thing, we were not sure which room we were, with which group we were in, whether we are doing the first one and the second one. But we decided that we will present both scenarios, and we can be corrected in the room. Maybe if I can start. Caroline, my colleague, will attempt this second one. I will attempt the first one, the donor retention rate and donor growth rate.
Okay.
In terms of that, our performance indicator will be, we'll look at the baseline first. We look at maybe currently how many donors do we have, and what will be our retention rate. Say this year we had, for example, 50 donors on board supporting us. We'll say our retention rate is not to lose a single donor. We want to make a 100% retention of all donors, whether they are giving us money, but we want to see them participating in our activities, even if they're giving us in kind or moral support to that effect. We just want to maintain them at the way they are, 100% retention rate. And in terms of the donor growth rate, we would say the aim is to increase the donors by 10%. Which means if we had 100 donors this year, next year we want to have 110 donors. If we had 50, it will be 55 by 10%. But along the way, may say mid-year, we will go back to the drawing board and see if our target of 10% increase, was it realistic or was just ambitious? We'll be able to determine there. If by June we manage to secure extra 6 donors, we can still stick to that one of the 10% growth rate up until the end of the year. But if we are at 2 by June, we will say no, maybe we need to reduce it to 5%. Our target was ambitious. That is how we understood. We tend to be preemptive and also futuristic in terms of our growth rate. Thanks. Caroline, do you mind to attempt the second one, or Goody?
Yeah, so no problem. This is Caroline here. So we are looking at the beneficiary satisfaction rate and the percentage of performance goals met. So we're looking at our participants and the number of participants we've trained so far. Although I don't have access to the pre and post-test survey that sort of rates participant expectation before the training and after, we rate their satisfaction after the training. I don't have access to it, but I collect their final report, and in it we have sort of recommendations and what they want to say about the training so far. And so far, it looks so good, and I can rate it at, let's say, 80%. So out of the participants we've trained, satisfaction rate is more than 80% in terms of its impact on their leadership skills and the impact they are making in their communities. And when those that have access to funds, they also are performing very well, and their interest is still with the training. Although I joined very late, this is how our discussion was going into that. I wish we had the M&E person with us, and he could have given more details about this performance rates. Thank you.
I like that. I like what I'm hearing. I mean, that's really great. The baseline information that you're talking about on the donor retention rate, and this is true on all of them, you definitely have to have a baseline because you got to know where you're moving from, right? I mean, if you have 0, then you're moving from 0, but setting those metrics at those levels, that sounds really great. And what I was going to ask is that I think I heard in the donor retention rate and the donor growth rate that was an annual metric, right? So you're going to predict that you're going to be at a certain amount, like you said, 100%, that's a pretty good goal, right? To be at 100% retention rate by the end of that year, and your donor growth rate would be at 10% by the end of that year. You make sure that you always put a timeline on it. And then, like you said, you would measure it along the way and determine what you can adjust to get your growth rate where you need it to be, or your retention rate where you need it to be, in order to make sure that your outcome at the end of that year is what you predicted. And I would not change the actual metric that you set. If you see you're not making it, I would make adjustments up to it in order to achieve that particular performance metric. If you don't achieve it, then you've got some post discussions that have to be done, that you talk about, one, why do you think that you didn't get to that level? Like you mentioned, was it too not attainable at some point? And maybe it was a lot too lofty of a goal, or maybe you could have done something that may not have happened, and you want to keep that goal for maybe the next cycle. And you can make adjustments in that next cycle to achieve that particular metric or that particular KPI. So I like those. I think you're doing great to predict what the future is going to look like. Same way with the beneficiary satisfaction rate. You already have a baseline of 80%, if that's what your baseline is. And if you want to keep that, you're going to predict that every annual cycle, you're going to have a beneficiary satisfaction rate of 80%. That's great. And then, of course, if you can challenge that, or if you want to challenge that to move that up every annual cycle, then that's doable as well. But the main thing is, predicting where you're going to end at the end of that particular measurement period, and making sure that you make adjustments accordingly as a result of that. And then percent of performance goals, Matt, I heard a little bit about that, but yeah, you want to at least set, some kind of KPI that says, at the end of the cycle, we're going to have met this percentage of goals. If it's 100%, that's awesome. If it's 90%, that's great too. So you just will need to decide, what that looks like for your organization. And these were just examples. I wasn't really sure exactly what your organization would measure and what would really be key strategic indicators based on the plan that you have, or the plan that you're going to create. First of all, you got to have your strategic plan. So if you guys haven't created that, then you'll need to have that created, and then work from that plan, like we were talking about before, to set those high-level key performance indicators that allow you to just at a glance look at, are we on track or are we not on track? And then if we're not on track, what do we have to do about it? All right. Other questions? Other questions? All right. Okay, so let's talk.
Sorry, Cindy.
Yeah.
I see all these key performance areas. They are basically two key performance areas, like your donor retention rate and donor growth rate. And they two, do you regard them as one? And they not supposed to be two? Just for clarity.
I kind of think they're two different things, because, I suppose you could probably put them together in one if you wanted to, but you're really measuring two different things, your retention rate is, how many donors do you continue that continue to work with you, right? And continue to donate to your organization. So that's a pretty big metric in my mind for an organization like you all have. And then you want to grow those donors over time. So to me, that's kind of two different things. You want to get more donors, and then you want to retain them. So it's, they work together, but I think they're really two measurements. At least I would. Yeah, I would probably put them as two. Because you have to do different things to get them engaged with you
Oh,
and
sure.
to keep. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Great. All right, so let's move on. If there are no other questions, I see Jasper. Looks like he's hanging out there. I don't know, Amy, if one of you guys will let him in.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's talk about tracking and reporting. I don't know how you guys all report on the current status of how you, report to your stakeholders, the accomplishments that you have achieved. I like to do it visually, and this has nothing to do with your organization or anything. It's just a representation of a bunch of graphs, right? And I'm sure that you do some of these, but I like to visualize the data in a way that it's easy for people to see at a glance what actually happened or what actually is happening. This also is really great for your organization, because when your employees and or volunteers are looking at, a metric or a graph that basically shows them how we're tracking, it gets them really excited about the fact that we're actually working towards those goals that we said we were going to. When I was the last company I worked in was a global laboratory. And we had a lot of people that were working in the lab, right? And we had to process, we were a very high volume lab where we processed a lot of samples in a day. And so it made sense for us to put in our laboratories these metrics that showed people how they were executing every day. And it really did help our execution levels go up, because people could see, and it was almost like a little bit of a game, right? To see how each person was doing and how the lab as a whole was doing. And I think it works the same way in any organization, where if you have those out there where people can easily see them and they're being updated on a regular basis, not only can you see at a glance what's going on and, oh, maybe we need to make adjustments here and here because we're seeing things are not quite tracking to the level that we need them to track in order to meet our outcome, our goal or objective at the end of that annual cycle or 5-year cycle or whatever it is. But the more visual you can make it, I just think that it really gets everyone energized about, taking action. And so it's also a great way to communicate to your stakeholders. Here we stand. So you don't have to show them everything, but you may want to show them some key things that they can take a look at and see how things are going. And it's probably a great advertisement mechanism for your organization as well in certain key metrics. I mean, there's some things you'll want to probably keep internal, but there are certain things that you may want to communicate more publicly. Versus a report. A report is important. I mean, it does give some verbal context to the graphics, but a lot of times it's really nice just to have a dashboard, so to speak, and maybe you already have these that can help you see where things stand on a daily basis. Any questions about that? Okay, great. I think that's pretty straightforward. All right, so let's just kind of wrap things up. This is a little shorter session because we're just talking about these KPIs, and you know, there's only so much you can say about them. I think, you know, you got to put them in place. They have to, you have to start by reviewing your mission, vision, and your strategic plans. So that means that you have a strategy that you've laid out for a specific time frame. You've set your goals. You've got to review those. And if you haven't set those goals, you definitely need to define some, because those are the things that you're going to attach your KPIs to. Then you want to choose a few KPIs for each potential goal. Maybe it's one, maybe it's two, depending on what your objectives are. And then set those so that you can drive performance on those particular goals and objectives. I will caution you to not make too many KPIs like we were talking about before. Make sure that they're at a high level so that you can, you know, and really indicate they indicate a critical success factor in your strategic plan that allows you to basically say, you know, I'm tracking towards this particular goal or objective, and I'm meeting it in this way. So all KPIs are going to be predictive, right? They're going to be leading indicators. And then you, like I mentioned before, visualize the data if you can. It makes it so much easier for people to understand. You know, they say, at least in here, they say a picture means 1,000 words, you know, says 1,000 words. It's just easier for people to really relate to it, I guess, and really understand, you know, what they're looking at versus words sometimes. And then, you know, also determine what's your stakeholders, what do they need to see from a KPI perspective. They're going to want to see that you're achieving your goals and objectives in the way that you said you were going to, and allowing them to kind of peer in throughout the year, I think is a great way to show them that you're on track, you're moving forward, you're actually going to achieve what you said you were going to achieve. And it also takes some pressure off of you all from having to create so many reports and things like that. So it gives you some time back that maybe you have used in creating extensive reports. And then again, it just really sets the pace for executing against your strategic plan. And I think that is about all that I have to say on that. And I'd be happy to take questions. And if you think of a question later, you obviously you have my email, and so you're more than welcome to email me. I'd be happy to talk to you that way as well. Questions?
Cindy, I have another question for you.
Okay.
Can you describe what roles there are in an organization that sort of take responsibility from the beginning sort of to the end, when you have these metrics, when you're taking them into consideration in your next planning? So who is doing what? Like how is your top leadership engaging these, your middle managers,
Sure.
you know, in your case, the folks in the lab, like how are different people engaging in this whole process?
Okay, so let's first talk about creating. So it's probably more your leadership team that's going to be creating your strategic plan to start with. While you'll get input from lots of people in the organization about what that strategic plan should be, it's usually the top leadership that puts that plan together, and then also relays that to the different levels in the organization of what that means to them. And so part of that is a communication process. And I know you guys have probably talked about that with Ferris and others. And we kind of talked about that in our technology session as well, since that aligns with the strategic plan. But then to execute against this plan, as we've been talking about today, it's everyone's responsibility. So you want to take those KPIs that you've developed and make sure that you have translated those down into each of the individual roles that you have in your organization. People at a higher level that have more responsibility are going to be responsible for more of the execution of your strategic plan than those on the front line. They may have a portion of it, but they need to understand what portion am I working on and how does that fit into the bigger picture, right? So that's a lot of communication. I usually have in the organizations that I've had a separate team that does data analytics, and you guys may already have this. And so I have that team really track the metrics that are coming out of the individual areas and put those together and visualize those, say, through a platform like Tableau or Power BI from Microsoft. You guys are using Microsoft, you may use that. They can put the data into that or actually have the data and the platform sits on top of the data, and they can take and make visual charts and dashboards and things like that off of that particular data. I like to do it that way. And usually this takes like maybe 1 or 2 people to do this in this role for an organization. It's not a huge group, but if you have somebody who's really understands data and wants to, really learn about data visualization, or maybe they already know about it, that's a great person to give that responsibility to. That way they can be creating the visual aspects of your KPIs and show the progress towards them. Then making that available, like we were talking about before, to everybody in the company, whether it be the leadership team, where they're going to see everything holistically, or maybe in your department, like I was talking about with the lab, where they're just going to see lab performance, and so you may have an area in your organization that may just see donor retention and donor growth rates and maybe several other things that they're responsible for. You would have that available to them. And that way everybody's really focused on what their responsibilities are, because that's the main thing out of this. We not only want to drive performance with these KPIs, but we also want to make sure that people understand how they're tracking, and also how they're doing as a whole from an entire organization. People get really excited about this when you can do this, because they know what they're working for every day. They get up, they get excited about working for an organization that's trying to accomplish something, and you guys definitely are. And this helps them to engage with that process. Does that answer your question, Amy? Hopefully it does. Any other questions? I know we went through a lot today, and please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And then too, don't be nervous about trying this. It takes a while to get the KPIs that make the most sense, and not overdo it. Just start with a few high-level KPIs and track to those and report those. And each cycle that you're measuring, you'll get better at it, and you'll go, okay, no, this is more important for us to know as a result of driving performance of the plan forward. And so you'll get better and better at it the more that you do it. It's an art and a science, I guess, with respect to the data that we work with. All right.
I have a question.
Sure.
We were working this year on our new KPI and how to adjust them because what we noticed was that we had like good performance. We were reaching actually those KPI. And the discussion was, as we are reaching them, we need to put them, let's say, higher.
Exactly.
And it makes the job, let's say, interesting because we need to make more efforts. But what we notice also is that the team is working on a lot of things, and those things do not appear on the KPI. So with your experience, what will you tell us? Will you tell us to adjust our KPI and put also those activities that are not represented? Or is it better to keep the focus on those KPI that where we need to report and that actually makes sense for the donors?
Yes. Okay. So that's a very good question. There are going to be things in your organization that you are doing that you are kind of adding to the KPI, but they're not the KPI itself. However, I want to start back at the strategic plan. In an organization, there's a lot of distractions, I guess. And I always talk to my teams about the fact that here's our plan. And if we really need to be focused on this plan and executing against this plan. And if we're doing other things that are outside of the plan, there better be a good reason for it, right? Otherwise, we shouldn't be doing them. So that's one thing. And then when we're setting KPIs, they're going to be fairly high level. So there's going to be a lot of details that happen underneath the surface in order to achieve that KPI. In those areas that are doing that, you need to have that KPI visible, but you also need to say, these are the business processes, like we were talking before, that need to continue, and we need to continue to measure those to make sure that we're on target. They contribute to this KPI. So I think the more that you can tie your business processes back to a KPI, I think then you will have
Particular week, but a number of you have been with us since the very beginning in May. So there is a lot that we have gone over during this time. If we had been in person, it would have been a very, very full week together because we've really had those days would have been a full 8 hours of presentations with probably no lunch and breaks. So we have shared a lot of information. We've had some good discussions. And yesterday, or was it a few days ago, Liz has been with us twice this week. But when she was talking about mentorships, one of the things she said that really struck me as very true is that we don't learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience. So we wanted to create this opportunity today to really reflect on what it is that we have done together and make sure that in our own minds, we are making the connections between the topics and what it is that we're doing on a daily basis and how all of these topics fit together in our organizational framework and with resource mobilization. So we're going to start by just doing a bit of a drive-by of all of the different topics that we have worked on together. So we have this on the slide. And what I'm going to invite you to do as I talk through this is grab a piece of paper and just take notes for yourself. So I am going to be talking about some of the high level topics that we addressed in each of the workshops. And as I'm talking, it may jog your memory a bit. And I would love for you to just start thinking about each workshop and some of the points in there that were particularly meaningful to you. And I know, again, some of you were not here for all of those workshops. That's perfectly fine. The PowerPoints will be available for you to review. And, you know, you can just write not applicable, or you may know about the topic already, so can just take some notes there. So we started in May with building a high performance organization with our own Dr. Faris Musa, who is with us today. And as a reminder, the key building blocks that he shared with us were strong leadership, high levels of employee engagement, continuous improvement and innovation, performance measurement and management, and clear vision and strategic direction.
Amy,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt, but your PowerPoint, I don't know if it's supposed to look like this, but it's looking like half of the screen now. So like they only can see or at least I can only see the building high performance organization.
Okay.
Okay, now I can see more of that slide.
All right. So I'm gonna have to work with a very small screen here.
Do you want me, like, would it be easier if I show the PowerPoint, for example, or it
If
doesn't-
you, that would be perfect. That would be perfect.
Okay. Did you send it to me?
The question is, so there is the PDF of the PowerPoint that got sent out to everyone. Did you get
Yeah.
that?
Do you want me to just
email,
go over use the PDF?
Yes.
Okay, I can use it.
So if you can open that PDF, that would be great. And as you're doing that, I'm just gonna keep going because I think that most folks can see this.
I'm ready, Amy, if you want.
All right. And can you all hear the sound in the background of my screen, or can you hear me okay? All right, so I'm just going to keep going. So we had decision frameworks, and some of the decision frameworks that we learned about were the Sinofin framework. And in that, we learned how to consider different contexts and how different contexts were important in making different kinds of decisions. We learned about ethical frameworks for making decisions and how we would consider a number of stakeholders in those ethical frameworks. And we talked about strategies for group decision-making. And then in our class about strategic planning, we really talked about a strategic plan as a high-level plan that accomplished the following: goal clarity, alignment and focus, proactive approach, decision-making guidance, adaptability and flexibility, and stakeholder alignment. And then we went to philanthropy and volunteerism. And in that, we talked about the role of a fundraiser, the culture of philanthropy, why and how people give, fundraising concepts, and the role of ethics and accountability in fundraising. And from there, we learned about strategies for motivating, recognize, and improving individual performance. We talked about continuous performance management process, setting goals and objectives. We talked about motivation and what it was, and recognition versus rewards, choosing a source for performance information, and the manager's role in an effective performance feedback process. And then CK Lee joined us to talk about resource mobilization performance. It was really resource mobilization writ large. And one of the key points he talked about was just the difference between organizations with self-sufficiency versus organizations with resource mobilization. So organizations with self-sufficiency were basically organizations that could fund the future of its activities endeavors through earned income alone, without having to depend in whole or in part on charitable contributions or public sector subsidies. Whereas an organization with resource mobilization was an organization that would fund future activities endeavors through a combination of earned income, fundraising activities, and financial support from the public sector. So with him, we talked about all of the different kinds of resource mobilization and how important it was to think through which kinds of resource mobilization would be in best alignment with your strategic plan and the purpose of your organization. All right. And then we talked about leadership communication. Okay, since I'm still sharing down here, let me see if I can at least try to scroll down so you can see what I'm looking at in terms of the topics.
I'm
Nope.
ready, Amy, if you want to switch anytime.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to stop sharing and Ferris is going to start. All right, excellent. That gives everyone an opportunity to see a bigger version of the screen. And so we learned about leadership communication, and it was really described as the process through which leaders convey their vision, ideas, and expectations to their team members, stakeholders, or the public. She talked about strategies and how it works and best practices for leadership communication. And then we went on to financial best practices for resource development. And we talked about resource development with an emphasis on private giving leadership, considerations, and strategies. We talked about private giving, including prospect research, cultivation, and stewardship. And we looked at both the big picture resource development and private fundraising. We talked about different resources available, important questions that we would need to ask ourselves in our organization when doing fundraising. And we got basically private giving 101. And then we went on to negotiation and stakeholder management. We talked about the overall principles of negotiation. We talked about power, rights, and interests, distributive bargaining, integrative negotiation, multi-party negotiation, and stakeholder management. And then our last workshop in May was mastering technology management. We talked about planning for choosing technology, guidelines for executing strategy, building a technology roadmap, and system selection process. And so that brought us to the end of May. And in the beginning of this week, which now feels like a long time ago, we started the week with the art of mentoring and coaching. We talked about generally what mentoring was, sort of what the ideal mentoring relationship was and how to build a mentoring relationship. And we talked about different coaching approaches, the coaching habit, and coach the person, not the problem. particularly focusing on how to ask questions that drew people out rather than coming up with answers for them in our mentoring relationships. And then we went to unlocking your organization's potential, a process improvement mindset. And there we really delved into the PDCA, plan, do, check, act cycle. We understood why a process improvement mindset was so important. We talked about using those tools in our own work and nurturing a culture of continuous improvement in teams. And then we went to building trust in teams and partnerships, strategies for success. We looked at the trust model that was at the center of the workshop, where we had the 4 different components of trust: authenticity, credibility, integrity, and empathy. And we worked on applying those both internally with our organizational relationships and in our external relationships. And then we went to building an effective organizational culture. We talked about the importance of organizational culture. George shared with us that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And we talked about the relationship between culture and strategy. And in particular, how we can be intentional about creating the culture that we want. And how important it is to look at our culture, identify what it is. And the 4 different categories that we were given were clan, adhocracy, hierarchy, and a market orientation to culture. And we were really to ask ourselves, what works best in terms of our strategy? And what are the different elements of these different cultures that we want to have in our organization? And I know that there is keen interest among everybody here to follow up with that topic within your RLC and YALI more broadly. We talked about enhancing team creativity and innovation. And there we talked about the importance of process. And we looked at the creative problem-solving model, which had 3 different stages: clarification, transformation, and implementation. And one of the things that we learned is that if a team is not organized and there's nobody paying attention to process, an individual actually ends up being a lot more creative than a whole team. But when you do have that process in place and you do have somebody who is paying attention to facilitating the team, you can get a lot more creativity. And then still walking through the week, pursuing and managing grant funding, where we got a pretty thorough overview of the different process for applying for a grant, all of the different things that we should be looking for, how we should be managing our time, what we should be paying attention to as we're looking at the call for proposals or notices of funding. And then what it is that we need to be doing to report on that grant and managing it in an appropriate way. And then we went to ensuring business sustainability, planning, implementation, and sustainability, integrating sustainability into planning. We learned, at least from a Swedish study, that 1 out of 8 organizations don't make it to sustainability. So it's a challenging road. And again, the key component that was found to indicate success is when that sustainability thinking was integrated into the planning as early as possible and not an afterthought or at the point when funding and resources ran out. And then now we're getting closer and closer We talked about building and sustaining healthy teams yesterday, and really just got an opportunity to work on that in groups, and looking at some of the challenges or goals within our different teams, different organizational makeups, and how it is that we would work on that with our teams. And then this morning, we looked at driving results using performance metrics to successfully implement strategy. And we talked about key indicators. So that brings us up to where we are right now. And I'm hoping, again, that as I've been talking, this has been sort of a jogging your memory. And let's just take another minute or two individually to look at these different topics and just write down for yourselves some of like the key important learnings for you from these different workshops. And so it doesn't have to be something for everything. Maybe there was just one workshop that had a lot of really important content for you. You can focus on that. But what we want to really think about right now is what were some of the key learnings and takeaways, and maybe even something that was reinforcing. It was powerful for us because it reinforced something that we knew. It was helpful to hear that those who were doing a lot of research on it were ending up with the very same conclusions that we have been reaching. So I'm going to stop talking, and we're just going to take a minute or two again individually to take some notes for ourselves. What were some of the key pieces in here that really were valuable to you? And Ferris, at this point, I'm going to go back to sharing the PowerPoint. So if you want to stop sharing, and I'm going to start sharing. Thank you. I'm going to do it in a minute. And Betty, I want to acknowledge that you are in the car, so I know it's not going to be easy to write. So hopefully you're thinking right now of the different topics and what was valuable. Okay. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So Charlie, what we are going to do next is just go into pairs. So if you could create 5 groups, I think one group will have 3 people.
Yeah, will do.
And we're just going to have 4 minutes in pairs to talk with each other about what some of the most valuable insights points were from these workshops for you. And we're going to come back after that, and then we're going to have the pairs get into groups of 4. So you'll be able to talk about that with 4 people. So let's start by going just into groups of 2 and sharing with each other what came up for you as you reflected on all of the courses. All right,
The
Charlie.
breakout rooms are ready.
Excellent. Very good. You invited everyone?
Yeah, they should all be open now.
Great.
And David just got here, so you might want to explain it again.
All right, let me see. David. Are you there? Can you? Excellent.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
So what we have been doing is just reviewing all of the different workshops that we have had in May and June, and identifying the points, the takeaways from those workshops that have been sort of most valuable to us. Like that,
Okay.
yes, that have really made the most sense. And we are getting in groups of 2 to talk about these. So just with one other person. So we will put you in a group.
I'd put him in a group of 3. I would need to create a new breakout room if I wanted to do a second or a new
Okay.
additional room.
That's fine. I'm just thinking maybe in the like the room where Betty hasn't joined.
Okay.
Yes, I can do that.
Okay. So, if I do understand, it's just an overview of what have been done so far.
Right. And what are the learnings that we have had that have been really valuable for us? And it could just be from one of the workshops, or there might be a couple things from different workshops.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So Charlie, is David, was he invited? Yes, I see he's invited but not joined. And Rich is in his own room. James, are you with us? James?
Yes, I am. But when I went to my room, there was no response. So that's why I've come back.
Okay. Did you see Rich there?
Yes, but it was silent. He was silent.
Okay.
So I'll maybe resend the invitation. Try and see if I get it.
Here, let me just join that room and see if Rich is there.
So Charlie, Betty has more than one account?
Betty does.
Yeah, I'm asking you or no, it's just one. Because
Are you talking about like Zoom account or?
yeah, because I see Beatrice in group 1 and room 1. And then Betty's iPhone with us.
Yeah, I think there might be 2.
Is that's probably her, right? Is the same person?
I know we have a couple Beatrice, so it might be.
Oh.
No, I
So
think it's Betty G, right?
James, Rich is there now and he can use his microphone. So if you're able to move back into that room, that would be great.
Okay, let me give it time.
I don't know.
Pierce, thanks for taking over with the PowerPoint. This is
Oh no, I mean that's
not a great setup that I have.
yeah, no, it's not a problem. I'm just did you want us to like, do you think we there is need, should we go bounce around, visit the teams, or just let them do their thing and then they report out?
I think they can do their thing and we can report out.
Yeah.
And very shortly, I'm going to have folks come back and we'll combine the groups so they can share with each other what they were talking about in their own group.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
So it's a 1, 2, 4 and more process.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, and Patricia's just arriving. Patricia, welcome.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
Doing well. And
Very-
yourself?
Doing well, thank you.
Good.
So here's what we're doing. I went through all of the different workshops that we have had so far in May and June and asked everyone to reflect on what was most valuable to them
Okay.
that came out of the different workshops. So right now, folks are in groups of just 2 or 3, sharing with one another some of the things that were most valuable to them and that they
Okay.
learned in the workshops or had in the workshop experience. And very shortly, we're going to invite folks back, and then
Okay.
they're going to go into bigger groups where they can share with each other what they talked about in their pair. So I would just invite you individually just to reflect and perhaps write down some of the things that were most valuable. So then you can jump into one of the other groups when we create
Okay.
them.
Right. That would be great. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, so Charlie,
Sorry, I was muted.
Are you there?
Yes.
okay, so it has been at least 4 minutes. It did take a few people a little bit to get in there.
Yeah.
And are you easily able to just combine that? You can, right? You can just manually keep the people together who are currently together and then just add a few more in.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, great. And then we'll just need to add Patricia to one of the groups that's smaller.
So you want them all to come back and then we send them out again?
You know what? I could just actually send out a broadcast and then why don't I do that? So they don't actually need to come back. Let's see, where's my broadcast capability here? There it is. Oh, this broadcast can't be very long. You have to learn how to be more concise. All right, so maybe in 30 seconds, Charlie, you can
Yeah, we'll do.
combine the groups.
Yeah.
Oh, it ended up that most people ended up being in 3s. Yeah, I guess you can group, just so it's not too many, you could join like room 2 with 4 and 3 with 5.
Yeah, I will do. And then do you want me just to separate one of the rooms since we have 5 rooms? Or do you want me to just combine them?
You just combine them at this point.
Okay.
And just remember to put Patricia in one of the rooms as well.
I'll start combining. Might take a bit.
Great. The room 2 is getting huge.
Yeah, because they got combined with the room 1 as well. And then I just sent Patricia over to room 5.
Okay, actually, I'm sorry. I didn't want that many people in a room. I thought it was gonna be 5 at most.
No, yeah, sorry about that. Do you want them? I can, because it was good. There was all the groups of 3, and then one of them was a group of 2. Or there's
Okay,
2 groups of 2.
all right. Do you remember who those are? Like who was in a group with another person?
Let me see if there's a way I can figure that out.
Or you know what, Charlie? Maybe we just keep them. They've,
Okay.
now that they've started. Yeah, I was hoping that it would just be 4 or 5 people. 6. And I think I misunderstood your question before. Yeah, we have a group of 8. Huh.
Yeah, because the 2 groups of 3, and then a group of 2 had to join them.
This makes it challenging with people coming and going, trying to figure out how to do numbers.
Yeah, it's been challenging throughout the week just because people join late,
Hmm.
so they have to get always updated on it.
I'm gonna step out for a minute, Amy,
Sounds good.
if you don't need me. I'll be back.
All right. All right, welcome back, everyone. It got a little confusing there because we were going to have you meet in pairs and then groups of 4, but then a number of people just started joining the meeting right at the same time. So I know that more people ended up in the groups than we had anticipated. So I'm guessing that not everyone got to speak, but what we want to do now is just open up the whole floor and invite folks to share, you know, what were the things that were most valuable, most meaningful? Did you notice some themes between what was valuable for you and for others? We'd just love to hear, and feel free, if you don't have any background noise, just to open up your microphone so you don't have to keep clicking it open and closed. What were some of the things that were most valuable to you from the workshops?
I will go first.
Great.
So at the beginning in our group, we were 2 and then 3 and then many. But what was interesting is when we shared the different points that we had, we were having some different points, but also some similar one.
Mhm.
And one that is similar was the philanthropy and volunteerism. The second one was the creativity, and also the KPI, the one we were talking about, KPI, the last one, the one that we had this morning, the driving results. And of course, there was many others like the coaching, mentoring, the mechanisms for giving, and also the art of negotiation. But what was more interesting in these discussions was people raised that everything was important and very insightful, very interesting. But when we took the most one, it was because we were trying to see the reference in our daily job, how it was going to help us.
Mhm.
And when we talk about the philanthropy, you know, in African perspective, it's more people volunteer a lot. But when we talk about philanthropy, it's still not like in the American way. It's people who are giving, but very small amounts for people for beggars or charity and so on. So it's very interesting to see it in an American perspective. For the creativity, the thing that was keep coming was the opportunity to give to the team to make some mistakes and also to, you know, to learn from the experience. Like the trust issues also was raised by Beatrice, what was very interesting. And the coaching and mentoring, it was more because we have to do the coaching and mentoring for our own alumni. That was interesting to be the team who received this training also. And also the last one, I think, was the mechanism for giving. The difference with the mechanism for giving and the others training was everything was written and we knew exactly what was the different steps. So just by reading the PowerPoint, we were able to know exactly what was the different composition of those mechanisms. I will stop there, and if someone in the same group want to share, they are more than welcome. Thank you, Amy.
Great, thank you, Kudi. That was a great overview, and it was interesting to hear some of the similarities and differences, and you know how obviously, I guess it makes a lot of sense that the ideas that you were able to really apply to your daily jobs were some of the most valuable, as well as trying to wrap your mind around something that's very different in a different context, like this concept of philanthropy and how that plays out in the United States and how that is different in some of your countries. So thank you so much for that overview. I'd love to invite anybody else to just share some of the things that you found most valuable? Yeah, we'd love to hear from somebody in the other group if possible. Betty, I see you unmuted yourself.
Yes, it's just that it's quiet. I was hoping someone can speak before I get home, but I think I have found this whole process from May to now very valuable. I think when we started on the first day, issues around high performance organizations and the fact that that has been mapped towards several aspects around what would support a high performance organization was very, very good to know. Fast forward, I think the one I can remember top of mind again is the day we spoke about trust as well, and how team members trust you and why they don't trust you, and how then decisions are made based on how much trust there is in the team. There was also a big one for me around the choice of a technology platform and the considerations to make, because sometimes you don't think that has been so well mapped. There was also, I think the other day around technology, technology I've spoken about, around creativity, and that creativity can be taught. That for me was a big eye opener, because I didn't think people can be guided through becoming creative on something. So he was talking about divergent and convergent thinking, and I just thought that was fantastic. And of course, coaching and mentoring was also big for me, maybe because I've been thinking around as a person, how can I give back? And I've been seeking to hopefully become a coach. And so I was interested, or it was interesting to hear that you can actually choose what works for you authentically based on your personality and what it is. And I think because I've also considered being a health coach for some reason, so it was very interesting to see how coaching and mentorship come around. So those were some of the highlights for me, but really, really, it's been a very interesting discussion. Also yesterday, just the breakdown of how proposals go about. I go about my work, but I don't think I've delved deep into understanding like exactly what happens. I kind of do it, but that was just reconfirmed that maybe I'm on the right track in terms of grants and yeah, so that was it. I missed the KPI one today, which is a shame, but I was in another event. So it's been really, really eye-opening for me from where I sit. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Betty, for your reflections. It sounded like there are some good new things that you learned, particularly around creativity and technology mapping and high performance organizations, and also just some good reinforcement. It is always great to just get that confirmation that you are on the right track. I think an incredibly valuable part of learning and capacity building is just recognizing that we have a lot of capacity. And I think that really builds a lot of confidence, and that is hugely important. So thank you. And what we're going to do now is just kind of look at the whole picture in terms of the courses and different organizational elements, and how resource mobilization kind of fits in to all of that. And I'm going to share the screen, hopefully more successfully this time. And, all right, let me move this guy up. Okay, and how is that? Can you all see my screen? Let's see, and I can't see many of you. So Ferris, would you give me some feedback? Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
I was on mute.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, so those are all of our topics. And now, oh man, I am having the technical difficulties. There we go. All right, so this little guy over here. This is an effort to pull it all together. And of course, this isn't everything, but I wanted to create this as a nested model, just to really emphasize the importance of resource mobilization. So what you have here at the center is really the ultimate goal, the vision, that which is most important in the whole organizational system. And I didn't put the whole YALI vision statement in here, but this was part of it. And I think clearly like the end that everything is working towards. So sustainable growth and prosperity for the continent. A little bit more simplistic, but really the why of this whole system. And then what we have that supports that is the YALI alumni. So those who participate in the program, because they are the ones that are going to do the work to create the sustainable growth and prosperity for the continent. So their action supports and holds this bigger vision. And then in the next layer here, we have programs and activities. So the programs and activities are what support the YALI participants and alumni as they go out in the world to work towards this much bigger goal. And then we have all of the organizational resources, right, that need to come together to support the programs and the activities. So you see a few of them that have shown up here already. And this isn't everything. These are kind of the big categories, particularly things that we've talked about. We have staffing, management, strategy, leadership, relationships, the quality of relationships we have in our organizations. We have systems and process. We have culture and skills. So these are some of the key aspects within our organizations that create a healthy whole system that is able to hold the programs and activities. And we're not going to do it now, but for fun, what you could do is look at all of the courses on both sides of the slide and draw arrows to these different organizational resources. I think what we tried to do, and Ferris, I think you did a brilliant job at this, is getting a little bit of everything that touched on all of those most important organizational elements. Because these have to be, so strong, functioning well and together to be able to hold those programs and activities that can hold the bigger goal in the center. And of course, if you can imagine any of these not being there, right? So if you didn't have skills, that part of the circle would collapse. And if you could picture it as a wheel, it would get everything off. If you don't have the right people, if you don't have an organizational culture that supports all of these pieces working together, it's going to be out of alignment. And so then finally, we have the outer ring, which is resource mobilization. And I think in some diagrams, you could imagine that as perhaps a function within the organizational resources. But I have it here designed as the outer layer, because essentially without those resources supporting the inside of the system, you would have something that looks like this, right? Everything would be floating in space. It would completely fall apart, and you couldn't do the work that you're doing. I think, Harry, you said that yesterday, that without the resources, without the primarily the money, other resources that come in from the outside of the system to support the inner system, you don't have a program, and you can't do your programming. You can't support the folks who are at the center. So we have tried within this workshop series to, again, identify a lot of the different topics that help create a strong organization, but put in the frame of resource mobilization. And that there are a number of really specific strategies and efforts to make the linkages with those on the outside that are able to create that protective layer that brings in, thinking about it as food, right? Like the food into the system so it can be sustained. So what we are going to do next is we are going to go to that. See if my computer responds to me. There we go. We're going to go to that outer layer, the resource mobilization layer. And we're going to have some time in small groups to look at one of these different strategies for resource mobilization: small donations, grants, and then large donations, either from individuals or corporations. And if there are other ideas that folks that you'd want to talk about, we can have a group for other. I am going to stop sharing for a moment so we can come back together. And remember, so we've got small donations, 1, grants, 2, 3, large donations, and 4, other. I'm going to stop sharing. And first of all, I would like to know if anybody here wants to talk in a small group about another kind of resource mobilization, like fees for services or creating products and swag that you can sell. If you could just open your camera, raise your hand if that is of particular interest, that would be really helpful, just so we know how we can make these groups. Bento would like to talk about that. Can you open your camera and or your microphone, Bento, and just tell us what in particular you'd like to talk about?
Me, I'm just thinking in terms of what additional mechanism we can use to raise resources. So, for example, I work in the recruitment unit, and we are busy developing a recruitment platform that's going to be owned by us. And I've talked to quite a few organizations that are in the leadership space also. And I don't think they have as sophisticated product as we have. So I'm saying, how can we provide that services? Given our network, given our database of young people that we have, to be able to provide services where we can recruit young people for other leadership projects, and they pay us for the service. So something like, so one of the, yeah, just an idea, yeah.
Oh, that sounds really exciting. And so what I want to see now is if there's anybody else in the group that would like to talk with Bento about that, just so we know if we have a fourth group here. Betty.
Yeah, not necessarily the Bento one, but I just wanted to know, I finally arrived home, so I'll be able to participate better. So I was wondering, what is the difference between grants and donations? Because I see small grants. I mean, small donations, grants, and then large donations. I thought grants are donations. Okay.
So grants are, obviously it's something that you apply for from a government source, from a foundation, to receive a particular amount of money, to carry out specific deliverables that you've agreed upon. So it's a different strategy or process than getting small donations, like from individuals, right? Those folks just give, they believe in the organization. There's no reporting that needs to happen. There's obviously a relationship that you want to maintain with those folks. And then of course the larger donations, gifts from corporations, that would be in a different category as well in terms of strategy. That make, I got thumbs up, Betty, so it sounds like that makes sense. Okay, great. All right, so I would like to see if anybody would like to join Bento in group 4, just so we know if we could make that. Jasper, are you saying you would like to join Bento in group 4?
Yes, Amy.
Okay, perfect. So we have 2 people. That is enough for a group. So Charlie, are you back?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Excellent. So what we want to do is we want to create 4 groups. And we would like for people to choose which group that they go into. Don't send people yet. I have a little more explaining to do. But we're going to want to have those 4 groups, and the topics, again, the group 1 would be small donations, group 2, grants, group 3, large donations, and group 4 will be the idea that Bento shared, trying to make money on this recruitment platform technology that Yali has been using. So those will be the 4 groups, and you'll be able to choose which one you want to go into. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint here.
Can Lloyd join Bento as well?
Certainly. Yeah, certainly. And so here is what you're going to be talking about in your groups. Okay. So, oh my. I'm not having a great relationship with my computer mouse at the moment. All right, I should be sharing again because I want to get to these questions. And these questions are designed to integrate some thinking around resource mobilization and the different internal resources you have in your organization, the ones we just talked about, like staffing and skills and systems. And what I want you to do, or invite you to do in your groups, is to go through these different questions here. So say you're in group 1 and you are looking at small donations, you're asking yourself, what is needed to mobilize this particular resource on the RLC level and Yali Africa level? And you may decide this is something that just needs to happen on the RLC level or just on the Yali Africa level. But since those are 2 things that are important right now, I want you to be thinking with both of those in mind. So what do you need to mobilize small donations? Okay, so what are the resources within your system, your organizational system, that you need? And one of the questions to ask is, do they already exist? Right? So reaching out to alumni could be a great strategy for small donations. To do that, you may need a database. Does that exist? Does it not exist? What does exist in terms of being able to connect with them? So we're looking at, does it exist? And then we're also looking at what change is required from the organizational resources to mobilize in group 1, small donations, right? Is there a change that needs to happen in management? Is there a change that needs to happen in leadership, within systems? What are the different aspects of the organizational resources that would need to change, like most likely expand or change focus in order to support bringing in small donations? And then next, what are 2 of the most important things that need to happen next, or efforts that have started but need to continue to support the change? I know that there's a lot that you've been talking about, you have been planning for. So we want to identify what are those changes that need to happen, what needs to happen for that to just keep moving or to be initiated, right? So what needs to happen next? What are 1 or 2 things that need to happen next? And then I want you to ask, and this gets into the evaluation and indicators, what will indicate if those actions are successful? How will we know if they are? Who is responsible for tracking progress? And how will what we are learning get fed back into the system? So these are a lot of questions. So as much as possible, try to keep this simple. Really focusing on what are those organizational resources that need to change? What are the next steps? And how will we know if those next steps are successful? And just, I'm going to invite you to carry through as many as you can here. And we are going to have, let's see, about 15 minutes to work on this. I know this is a lot within 15 minutes, but hopefully it will create this momentum to start making these connections between these resource mobilization strategies and some of the organizational resources. Are there questions about this before we break into groups? Okay, I don't see any questions. So Charlie, if you could create those 4 groups and allow people to choose them.
Yeah, I'll just let everyone choose which groups they're going to be in.
Fabulous. And again, group 1, small donations, group 2, grants, group 3, large donations, group 4, the recruitment platform. So let's move into those groups and start working through those questions.
All right, it's all open now, so everyone should be able to choose which group.
All right. Stop sharing. Okay, I see some folks who are moving now. Okay, those who are still here, is it clear how to move into a group? Christian, James, David, Erasmus, Patricia. What are our breakout rooms doing? All right, we have 2 rooms with just 1 person. So Erasmus, Christian, James, Patricia, are you here with us?
I don't know, are they in between? Because it says unassigned.
Yeah, everyone should be able to get to choose themselves, but if everyone in this room
Oh.
hasn't decided on what they want to do, I can just assign them manually. If you want that.
Yes, I'm just wondering, go ahead.
I was gonna say there's not much time because it's already 11:15, so
Yes.
just assign.
Yeah.
That would be my
Mhm.
suggestion.
Yeah.
Oh, I might have sent you Ferris. My bad.
Wow.
Okay, and now we have somebody else who's just joined. All right, Jasper and Betty, you just came back in. Are you able to see the room that you're being invited to?
I mean, it's giving me room 3, but I was supposed to join Bento, or we don't have 4 again.
Okay, so
I can move you to 4 then.
Because I was supposed to work with Bento before my internet went out.
yes, we'll move you in there. Charlie's moving you. Okay, good. There's at least 2 people in each room. James and Erasmus, are you here with us? Okay, they must not be here. But Charlie,
Yes, yeah.
if we give people 5 minutes to fill out the evaluation form, like if they don't finish, they could go back to it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then we could just send the link. So maybe we'll just do 5 minutes for the evaluation form.
That's good.
And we will not have time for a full report out. I also don't think we're going to need a full 30 minutes for the graduation. Paris, is that your sense as well?
Yeah, it should be fine. It just depends on how long it takes to like read through. That would be the longest part, I think, but it shouldn't be 30 minutes. So. But I know the reason I'm saying that is because like Mert yesterday told me that he's gonna stop by. So people are gonna, there might
Show
be
up.
a few people that start showing up. So that means we have to probably move at that point, you know?
Right, or as soon as we can.
Yeah. So that would be, you know, just in preparation.
Sure. Have you talked to anyone else who's going to show up?
CK told me that he can't. He has other commitments during that time. So those were the only 2 that I heard from at that point.
Okay, and I heard from Liz that she will not be able to come.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
and so we do have some folks who have just been attending periodically, or the limited number of workshops who have come in, but not all of them. So I'm just gonna kind of move, I'll have to just move through that second list of people, knowing that not everybody is here, but a few of them are here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's just, you know, a way of acknowledging everyone, and saying congrats. So
Yeah, I'm really recording. I should probably